Serious parents of Reddit who decided to cut contact with your children. What's the story? Story 1. Cheap and easy to obtain heroin was the beginning of the end. Twice he robbed me of all my possessions, even my car. 1 8-month stint in state jail during which I visited with his daughter every weekend, and upon release I brought him home only to be robbed again. 3 failed attempts in recovery centers, after which he and his girlfriend abandoned their children, leaving them with me for 4 years with no contact of any kind. At 32 Yoa, he is now unable to remain out of the county jails for more than a week at a time. I'm done. Story 2. So I had my son early, around 17. The girl I had him with moved away before I met him. 5 years later I get sued for child support, so I paid and decided to try to take some care of this child. Fast forward to him in high school. I never got to spend more than the summers with him due to him living so far away and the fact that his mom is Anyway, I find out that he hasn't been to school in literally years, so much so that by almost 20, he hadn't graduated grade 9. Things go wrong in my life too. My ex-wife decides to leave me for some woman, and my son shows up at my doorstep saying that his mom kicked him out. I told him that he had to go to school if he's going to live with me. He finally agrees, and I start finding out how terrible his mom did for him in school. He was labeled as severely learning disabled, schizophrenic, and was prescribed antipsychotics, which I'd never seen him take. It turns out he told his mom that he was seeing things, and after she took him to every doctor in the city, the first few couldn't find anything wrong with him. She finally got a few diagnoses. I took him to my doctors, and find out that he was playing along so that the school would give him an easier time. I get the school to give him a chance, and he finally starts honors English, math, etc., and, to everyone except me surprise, he passes with high grades, so much so that he is accepted into college with a minimal of effort. Figuring he turned over a new leaf, I decide to buy him a car, put a couple of months rent down on his own apartment, and give him a couple $1,000s to help with tuition, not to mention that I bought him a laptop, a bunch of dishes, pots and pans, etc. He looked so proud when he moved in, and I remember beaming all the way home after helping him move in the week before school starts. I see him for the next couple of weekends to ensure that he is transitioning to his new place well enough. Although he seemed a bit lonely at times, he seemed to be adjusting quite well. 2 weeks after school starts, I get a call from the school telling me that my refund was processed. I immediately call my son. Much to my surprise, his cell phone was cut off, even though I'm the one who pays for it. I go to his apartment to see if everything is okay, and the superintendent told me he moved out last week. I haven't heard from him since, but through the grapevine I found out that a friend of his won a legal battle and got a few $100,000, so they pooled their money to become big-time drug dealers. I have no idea where he is now. I haven't heard from him, his mom hasn't, his grandparents haven't, nobody has. Story 3. My son's paranoid schizophrenia symptoms are triggered by my presence. As a father, I wish with every breath that I could talk to him and hug him, but he's better off without me around. It's the same whether he's medicated or not. I only wish I could make him understand or feel like he understands why I'm not in his life. Edit. Thank you to everyone who commented, upvoted, gilded, and spared a thought for me and my family. I've frequently been moved by the kindness sometimes shown on Reddit, and I now feel like I've experienced it firsthand. I wanted to take the time to respond generally to some of the comments and questions. Most of all, those who are afflicted as my son is, and those who are in similar situations with their children. Thank you for validating that this dynamic occurs. My wife and I need to work through this because she sees my pulling away from our son as a cop-out. We've had some counseling over the years, and I sometimes attend NAMI National Alliance on Mental Illness Family Support meetings. I stay busy in my community, so I can't always make it to a meeting, and it's been a while, so I have resources to discuss this, but I've literally never encountered another family where this dynamic is occurring. Thank you for speaking up, and know that you are in my thoughts. I'll share that I did attempt to reach out in a small way to my son a few weeks ago, on his birthday. He's living in a group home now, and my wife went to see him, knowing that he loves Zaxby's chicken wings. I sent a Zaxby's gift card, and a birthday card. I tried to keep it trigger-free. Happy birthday. I hope you enjoy your Zaxby's. Love, Dad. During their subsequent visits, there is one constant that she reports back to me when they discuss where they'll eat. There's one place he won't go: Zaxby's. I don't want to come off all whiny, but it's as if I broke Zaxby's for him. I knew that was a risk, but I was trying to see what I could do for him. I'm just glad it wasn't Crystal. He really loves Crystal. For those whose loved ones are nasty to them, I actually remember the days my son was nasty to me as good ones. At least we were together, and we had the occasional laugh or other positive interaction. I hope that you can consider accepting that as a cost of being with someone who might not be able to help themselves. Don't take it on board. Maintain your emotional boundaries. Change the subject. I know it's very difficult. Anyway, no, I've not turned away from him because he is mean to me, but rather that my presence seems to trigger self-destructive behaviors. For instance, he's burned through several group home situations, each one within days of my attempting to reintroduce into his life. It was always the same pattern: he'd get into a situation, he'd do well for a few weeks. The rules of the place would permit him a visitor, my wife and I would visit, his behavior would deteriorate, he'd be put out on the street. His current living situation is lasting longer than any previous one, and I ascribe that to my absence. For those asking if I might have abused him, the answer is no, but I will share that his turn against me was so shocking and disorienting to us all that my own wife asked me the same thing. And yes, I was not always a paragon of patience and understanding during this time. We did lash out physically at each other, but it was situational and rare. I regard these incidents as a symptom, rather than a cause, of the reality as I understand it now. His mother and I made a lot of the usual mistakes parents make, and when I took parenting classes I was horrified at the damage I might have done to him due to those mistakes. I think those mistakes could have engendered a lack of independence and a sense of entitlement in him, but I do not regard them as a cause of his severe mental illness. I'm open to trying to find a life configuration that permits me to be a positive influence in his life. I haven't found one yet. And as a person who tries to live and laugh and love, I want to share that the people suggesting I put on a disguise and interact with my paranoid schizophrenic son sent my mind into its always sunny territory. Laughter through tears. Anyone, one more thing here, as an afterthought reading all this, you'd never know that my wife and I also have a daughter. She's 18, about to head to university. She has told me, to my unending pain, that she has often felt like an afterthought. Even when he's out of the home, our son can all the air out of the room with just a mention of his name. I became conscious of this dynamic only about 10 years ago during a brief respite from our son's rapidly declining behaviors, and we try to remain conscious of that. But that's just another side to this that some of y'all might benefit from hearing about. Thank you all, you've restored some of my faith and taught me a lot. Story 4 took a bit to decide if I wanted to share my story, but here goes. I'm the father in question. I have 3 kids, 2 daughters and 1 son. They're all adults. I got married at 20 and we had them one after another. For years, my wife and I blamed ourselves about how my youngest girl turned out. Being so young, right out of community college, I wasn't making a lot, so I did the best I could, but we wonder if it was nutrition or that we stayed in or something that made her be born with severe BPD. We didn't know what it was at first. She was really difficult. We tried our best to raise her well. By the time we figured out what was wrong with her, she had set in really bad behaviors. We still think she's the one that mutilated the neighbor's cat but can't prove it. As of 2 years ago, she refused to take her medications, was sleeping around with whoever would shoot her up with drugs, stealing money, and generally being really difficult. We told her to leave and never come back, tried to get her into a state mental place but it wasn't an option, so we just closed our doors and moved shortly after. Honestly don't know what happened to her since. I tell people I only have 2 kids, wife is devastated, but I'm just relieved. Sorry baby K. Story 5. I'll try to keep this short because diving into all of what has happened that lead to us cutting contact would be a novel. When I married my husband he already had 2 older children that lived with their mother. My husband and I ended up having 2 kids of our own. While my oldest was an infant my stepchildren moved in with us and that's when everything started. They caused so many problems for us. I'm talking heavy drugs, sneaking out and getting arrested, you name it. The older of the 2 called CPS twice and made up lies about me being abusive. As a new mom the investigations were terrifying, but in the end they found their claims to be false. The final straw of them living with us was when we got wind of them off the wrong crowd and the possibility of our home getting shot up. Their dad sent them to live with their mother. I'm just going to jump to when the actual cutoff happened, but keep in mind we had an endless amount of horrible incidents with them over the years, and we tried to help them countless times. They were both in their 20s at this point. Essentially, we discovered they were stealing from my side of the family. They robbed my sister of her fine jewelry, and took what we totaled to be around $25,000 from 3 family members. Beyond that, they had a drug operation going on in a family member's summer cottage. The family member didn't know they were even there as he lived elsewhere most of the time. When confronted by their dad, they blew up. They said some of the most hateful things I've ever heard, and spit in his face. That was it for us. They took advantage of people that loved them very much and had no remorse for it. Story 6. My stepson is a mess. My husband and his ex-wife divorced when SS was 18 months old, and mom had done whatever she could to cut dad completely out of his life until SS was 8 when she showed up at our door with SS in tow and his bags. She said she couldn't handle him anymore. All he would do was fight with his siblings, so if we didn't take him then she was going to take him to the children's home. Of course my husband was excited to finally spend time with his son, and he would get to bond with his little half-brother who was 4 at the time and stepsister who was 10. It became apparent very quickly that he had been fed lie after lie about his dad. He would gleefully share very detailed stories about the abuse that he remembered that he and his mom suffered at the hands of my husband. SS was in therapy, but really started escalating dangerous behaviors. My daughter would wake up in the middle of the night with him standing over her saying, "Next time you'll never wake up," so we put a lock on her door which he broke through with ease. We put a deadbolt on her door. He broke the door frame trying to get to her. His little brother would walk by and he would kick him as hard as he could. He bit him until he would draw blood. The last straw for me was when he barricaded himself in his room with his little brother. I could hear my son screaming. When I finally got in, my SS was molesting him. That for me was the last straw. He needed more help than what his therapist or we could do for him. The next day Child Services was contacted and he was removed from our home. A few weeks later CPS gave us pages and pages of psychological evaluations that his mom had on him. Pages of her blaming dad for each of his issues. Lies that he had beat and molested him, although there were statements from doctors that had clearly outlined that mom and her family had some seriously undiagnosed mental issues. There was so much information that would have been helpful before he came to live with us. I would never tell my husband that he cannot see his son, but his son is never allowed around my children. I made that promise to them both, and I hate that my husband is in the middle, but for our safety I've cut off any contact with my stepson. Story 7. My husband's oldest daughter is not part of our lives at this point. We basically discovered that everything she ever said was a lie. She got involved with a younger guy that's a real, He's horrible to her and her daughters. She called the police on him, kicked him out, said she was never going to see him again. We made it clear that he would not be allowed around us or the other kids for any reason. She says she's pregnant. His dad blasts them on Facebook for being idiots, pointing out what an irresponsible mother she already is. She goes on a rant about how she pays her bills and takes care of her girls. The whole time I'm thinking, I paid your gas so it wouldn't get shut off. I am apparently the only one attempting to feed your kids something other than marshmallows, and am the only one that ever expects them to behave, not to mention the million times I've cleaned caked on dirt from their feet or necks because she won't bathe them properly. She had a miscarriage the next day, wanted some kind of sympathy, even though she had been hoping for a miscarriage until her bio mom convinced her that she needed another grandbaby. Anyway, a day or two later she asks for a ride. I ask how and where. She wants us to give abusive ex that has already moved back in with her a ride to the store. No. Reminded her that we're not doing anything for him ever. Pointed out that it's pretty disrespectful of our wishes to try to force him on us. She threw a tantrum, he threw a tantrum, told us get over it or don't speak to her and the grandbabies again. I told her I'm not having that abusive piece of around her siblings. She can either respect that or move on without us. She chose the abuser. We've ran into them driving around town a few times. The guy will literally hang out the window of the car screaming, making faces, and flipping us off every time. They act like they're still 12. I miss my grandchildren, but I don't miss their mother. Edit a little more info. My grandchildren have a father that's working on getting them. It'll take time, but he knows he has our full support. Grandparents do not and should not automatically have rights. Without substantial evidence of abuse or neglect, family services will not do anything. They can't remove children from a home just because grandma said so. And when it comes right down to it, money greases the wheels and the dad's the only one with money to spare. This is a difficult thing for me. I'm not the ideal father in this situation. I know it. All I can say is that this whole thing weighs heavily on me. I have two girls. Their throwaway names are Jane and Janet. They have two mothers, Susan and Roxanne respectively. I was 19 years old when my first daughter, Jane, was born. Her mother, Susan, decided to leave me when she was about 2 years of age. She wasn't in it anymore, found what she was looking for in the arms of a narcissistic coke dealer. For a while anyways. Later this would turn to severe alcoholism, depression, etc. Lifelong struggle kind of thing. My eldest daughter has turned into a remarkable young lady, but like anyone, has her own things she deals with. Just shy of 3 years later, my second daughter, Janet, was born to a different mother, Roxanne. We dated but were not really serious. One of those types of things. This was very difficult for me as I was a 22-year-old. Already paying child support, was financially and emotionally stunted. Yes, we were careful, thanks. I wasn't ready to deal with this again, that's on me. I wish I had a better mind at the time, but I had almost no contact with my second daughter until she was 7 years of age. I don't know, I just was avoiding dealing with the fact that I was single father, two children and two mothers. It was something that for me, was very difficult to deal with. Her mother, Roxanne, is a decent person, with no direction in life, loves tattoos, never could hold a job, is a great conversationalist, and is obsessed with the alternative lifestyle. Now, a little background for those who aren't in this kind of thing. I've always paid my child support, but the effect of this on a young person financially is devastating. I am 40 and just now making enough to support myself and my family. I work in IT and was fortunate enough to have a skill in an emerging industry 1990 era. If you choose this path in life, you work and give up a large portion of yourself and your lifestyle because of the choices you've made. I could not attend college as I had no money, and no time. I tried on 3 separate occasions to attend a local community college. I eventually couldn't keep up with working 2 jobs and attending school, and raising my daughter by myself. We had 50 shared custody agreed between Susan and I, never by a court. Around the 7-year mark, 10-year mark for my eldest, I made the commitment that I would be involved if my youngest was interested. I had come to my senses that I was being as selfish of a father. I didn't want to be that person anymore. Her mother thought it would be a good thing for everyone. She was starting to hold down a job. Finally, what single mom can't use a break? It was great. I had both the girls over to my home on weekends. We cooked together, watched TV, went to parks, etc. I really enjoyed this time with them, remember it very fondly. Just me, the young ladies, that made me a special person. I lived in the Midwest during all this. Eventually began to date a woman from the South, who I've known for a very long time. We knew each other as children, have been around each other from time to time our entire lives. This led to long-distance dating and eventually marriage. 10 years almost. She wanted to move to where I was at, but was unable to due to the legal system involving her own children. I made the decision to move south, be with my wife. This was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, as it meant that I wouldn't be around the girls on a regular basis. My girls are 12 and 9 at this point. I moved and found work fairly quickly in the IT world. I paid my child support regularly, caught up on the move gap over the course of 6 months. I began to plan to have my girls come visit. They did from time to time. Jane visited more frequently than Janet as her mother had issues with alcoholism. She wanted to be away from it, and Susan would also help with the travel expenses involved. I also would visit from time to time, and stay with a couple of friends to reduce the expenses involved. Good pals are good pals, and it helped me see my kids. Janet would come to visit during the summers, and this part is where things started happening. She was to stay with us for a month during the summer as was agreed upon. Once she came to visit, her mother would constantly be on the phone with her, for hours. There was rarely a gap in their constant communication. I expressed to Roxanne that this was the time that we have with Janet, we would like to spend it with her. This was met with she isn't comfortable in the house and misses home. This continued on a daily basis. I asked my daughter if she was nervous about being with us down here. She said yes. I miss my mom, I understand that. Eventually, her mother had a friend drive down with her, picked her up 2 weeks into the visit. Maybe a month was too long for an initial start, I don't know. Next year we did the same thing, had both girls down for the summer, and agreed that the visit would be 3 weeks. Once again, my eldest was excited to be here, my youngest couldn't get off the phone with her mother. Once again, I expressed that we would like to have the time with her that we are allowed. Once again, the visit was cut short, this time, 1 week after she had arrived, frustrating. Eventually, my Jane moved in with us and attended her first 2 years of high school. She wanted to be with us for a while to get away from the things at home. Again, Susan had a very bad alcohol problem, and I mean Bayarod. Jane wasn't happy in the home, said wanted a fresh start going into high school. My wife and I agreed. She moved in with us. During her sophomore year, Jane came to me one night and said, "Dad, Janet is telling people that you molested her." I was absolutely floored. The first thing I remember was confusion, anger, panic. I called, but Janet refused to talk to me, though she did say that she didn't want to be my daughter and that she hated me. I tried contacting Roxanne. Her response was, "I'm not sure what's going on," as Janet would only talk to Jane once in a while now. Slowly Jane got a story out of her. When she would come visit, she was uncomfortable in the house, wasn't comfortable with any physical affection. Yes, I am aware of the signs, but am also the one being accused. I attempted over the next 6 to 8 months to make contact with Roxanne or Janet, but was met with "she isn't ready" kind of statements. I recall asking directly, "Do you really believe that I am capable of something like this?" Answer: "No, but I don't know what to think." Plainly, Janet just didn't seem to want contact, y'all. This changed me. I went into depression, withdrew from my family, still feel affected on a daily basis. I'm a mess sometimes. My mind is confused. I have panic episodes, difficult time focusing on tasks. I had frequent anger outbursts. The list goes on. 3 years pass. One day, Roxanne calls. I asked about Janet. She's doing good, keeping herself together. She's not. She's a mess. I'm in IT. I know how to use social media, but she's cut contact with me. Eventually, I made contact with Janet over text messages. She expresses to me that she's sorry and that she didn't feel that she was molested and wants to be a part of my life, and that she is glad I didn't give up on her and wants to try harder and loves me. I am glad, but can see that there is some serious emotional issues with this child. I also cannot help but feel that I am responsible for this due to my uninvolvement when she was young. My bed takes some serious weight. Janet is 17 now. I've sent birthday and Christmas wishes, all that kind of thing, and expressed that I care for her and would love to see her, but it is completely one-sided. She never calls nor makes attempts at communication. I see her on social media frequently with just the trashiest things, talking about drugs, that sort of thing. She's obsessed with her appearance and how men perceive her. Yeah, I know. I gave up trying to communicate with her this year in January. The last thing I said to her was that I loved her. I think she is a wonderful young lady, and am here for her if she ever wants to talk or come visit. I would welcome her with open arms. I haven't heard a word back, but I watch from a distance, and sometimes I am disgusted from the window from which I have to watch her. I am afraid that she is turning into a very trashy young lady, and it's like watching something you know you can't affect. We make our own beds and lie in them. I wish I had been a better father to her. Story 8. I gave my son up for adoption at birth. I was broke, jobless, homeless sort of. I had a room at the worst hotel in town, was about to kick his dad out, and even if I could find a job I had no one that would watch my then 18 mph-old and a newborn while I worked. I know, a lot of y'all will rag on me for even being pregnant. We had a great apartment, a happy relationship, and great jobs when we decided to try for another baby. Things went south really fast, and I couldn't think of anything else I could do for my kids than to give the baby to parents that could take care of him the way he deserved straight from the start, and fight like to claw my way out of the hole I was in and give my other kid a better life too. So I did it. I gave him up to wonderful, amazing people. 6 weeks later I was cleared to work and miraculously got a job, saved for a year and moved myself, my toddler, and my kid's dad out of that godforsaken town. Years and years later I'm doing very well. I stuck to my promise that it would be worth it. Anywho, I haven't talked to him. I got letters from his mom for a while, always with pictures, but not anymore. I never responded to them or wrote him. They had been burned in the past by birth moms shopping around and trying to sell their babies, and I've heard horror stories about adoptees contacting their birth parents and discovering they were utter and they were better off without knowing what happened to their birth parents. I was worried that me contacting them would complicate his life in ways he didn't need. They are wonderful people. I would rather live in pain, heartbreak, and uncertainty than intrude in their happiness. I want to know him more than anything in the world, but if he doesn't, he'll stay right here, away, quietly making good on my promise to him that it would be right and worth it and that I would never again be in that spot. He would be 15 now, Matthew. If you are reading this, I love you forever and always, my baby you'll be. A huge thank you to everyone who commented. I finally had the courage today to call the law offices that handled his adoption. They were very kind. I am fortunate that they picked a very pro-birth mom practice. The one who personally handles my case is out today and Monday, but he took my name and number and assured me that I would get a call from the paralegal on Tuesday so she could get all the information she needs to try to set this up. I'm so hopeful right now. Thank you, people of Reddit. Because of all of your kindness, I might actually get to meet him soon. Update: they said no. Story 9. I don't love her, she doesn't love me, and we have nothing in common. All names are changed. When I was 22 I met a beautiful woman who was in half my college classes but was a mature student. When Ella was 14 she had given birth to a daughter Anna. By the time Ella and I moved in together Anna was already 15. It was like having a roommate. Anna was a great kid and all that jazz, but she wasn't interested in spending all that much time with some random man. Then 3 years later she moved out and I became the random ex-roommate who covers her tuition. People seem to think it's a tragedy, but we don't dislike each other, we're just not interested in contacting each other. We both love Ella and sometimes we happen to be spending time with her at the same time, like when Anna comes home for Christmas. When I married Ella I promised to take care of Anna. I don't regret that, but my care falls mostly on the financial side. Although I went to every game she had and every teacher conference, we just failed to bond. She's more like a distant cousin than a daughter. Story 10. My 33-year-old daughter chose drugs and thug life over her husband and 2 boys. Hasn't seen her boys in 4 years. They're only 7 and 5. The oldest remembers her, the youngest does not. I've been dealing with her darkness since she was in 4th grade. Took her to countless therapists in her youth. She convinced them all she was fine. I tried to help her through probation and rehab again last year in the hopes of reuniting her with her boys. She was snorting, now she's shooting. Nothing legal to keep her from these boys. She chose drugs. I'm done. Never realized what an epidemic this has become until I started talking to people who are dealing with the same thing with loved ones. It's definitely effed up. Story 11. I had a daughter when I was fairly young. I married her mother and spent a few hellish years with her until divorce became necessary. We agreed to split custody so long as she received full physical custody. It made sense under 3 circumstances. Within a few years, it became obvious my emotionally volatile ex-wife was just poisoning our daughter with absurd lies, and to some extent, no doubt, her family as well. My kid became distant and then anxious around me. Her mom began to move an awful lot, and it eventually became undeniable that she was intentionally hiding from me. I tracked her down on Christmas 2013 at a house her father directed me towards. She was livid that I showed up to say Merry Christmas and drop off gifts for my daughter and her younger sister. My daughter logged at me like a complete stranger, even frightened. They were never home when I tried to visit after this and soon moved again. Realized no contact was available to me. Her mom called me from her mother's number months after and asked for a large sum of cash to pay for school stuff. It was April, I think. I asked her where my daughter was before I agreed to anything and she got angry and hung up. I stopped trying, I guess. Story 12. Parental alienation. My husband walked away from his daughter because her mother did everything in her power to prevent or destroy any semblance of a father-daughter relationship. Lots of mind games, lying, passive-aggressive behavior and character assassination. Mom told everyone my husband physically abused her daughter. We didn't have the money for a lawyer or family to lend money to us, we're on our own. Every single court-ordered visit was a battle with the mom. It was so hard on his little girl. In the end my husband felt it was best if daughter 4 by then was adopted by her stepfather, as he seemed like a decent guy. Figured he would be raising both mom-daughter. Only for the mom to repeat the process with him 3 years, 2 more kids later. I can only imagine what sorts of lies the daughter has been told about her bio father. She's 15 now. Someday we hope to reconnect, away from her mother's influence. Edit to clarify, my husband had a lawyer off and on throughout this whole thing. But she wasn't very good, but that's all he could afford. The lady, bless her heart, tried, but she was no match against the opposition. He would basically have to tell her what to do next. By the time it became apparent he had to switch lawyers to see any sort of change in the situation, resources were completely exhausted. We didn't have the thousands for a retainer for a new lawyer, much less the thousands and thousands to keep the fight going. Story 13. My daughter refused to leave her second husband, who would get drunk and try to kill her. Once when one of my granddaughters, who happened to be 6 months pregnant, tried to intervene, he knocked her to the floor. He picked up my daughter by her neck and slammed her head so hard against the wall it left a hole. Last time he pulled out a gun and pointed towards my other granddaughter, who was trying to get my daughter away from him. He had already shot a hole in the tile in the master bathroom. He was also bullying my 15-year-old grandson on a daily basis. We now have custody of the kiddos. But every time the phone rings our anxiety hits the roof, as we fear that will be the call to say my daughter is dead. Background: we took her and her first husband in when he wouldn't work on a regular basis because they had no food, no money, and being evicted. Once the first hubby stole my mother's wedding rings. When I asked him where they were, he said he'd taken them to a jeweler to be sized for my daughter. I went to the jeweler. Nope, no rings. No record of the rings. I confronted the SIL and he finally admitted he pawned them. Another time he stole my ATM card out of my purse and helped himself to 300. Had to get the video from the bank to prove to him that he was busted. This is while they lived with us. He pretended he got paid for a job. Once he said he had gotten a job, he didn't. He left every day and went who knows where till 6 p.m. All of that through their 7 evictions. Paid for mover storage and brought them back to our house to live. And we bailed him out of jail 4 times. I have bailed my daughter out of jail 3 times, and she was in the mental hospital 3 times for suicide attempts. My daughter finally left him, yay, only to hook up with another abuser. I still love her but have done all I can. Story 14. I'm not really sure if this applies. When I was in the military overseas, I was raped by another service member. When I came back to the CONUS, I ended up having an open adoption for the child. At first I wanted to visit and get to know the kid, but after the birth I just decided it's best not to for me and the kid. The only people that know about this is my boyfriend and immediate family. Otherwise I don't tell people that I've had a kid before. It's very hard sometimes. Story 15. I cut off my dad. Growing up we had all our material needs met. A nice house, enough food. He paid for me to be privately educated. But he's always had a horrible temper and would scream at us and smack us. And I don't mean the way parents usually yell at their kids. I mean completely lose control and rage completely out of proportion over normal kid things like knocking something over or making noise while playing, and you would have to stand there and take a load of verbal abuse. And if you moved or looked at him the wrong way, that wasn't okay, and it would get worse. I have some bad memories of him screaming at my little brother for having a toileting accident and punishing him for it by pushing his face into it. My brother was 3. The smacks were within the legal limit, i.e., didn't leave bruises, but he would just dish them out for arbitrary punishment, and they were accompanied with a lot of rage. It was like he thought we did bad things on purpose to manipulate him. As we grew up he still used to yell at us but didn't smack us as much. He constantly told us how ungrateful we were and criticized pretty much everything we did. Even if we did something well, he'd always let us know how it could have been improved. My confidence was extremely low as a teen, and I was always terrified of doing things wrong. I was a really good kid and desperately wanted to please my parents, so I'd just apologize and agonize over getting everything right, basically believing my dad that it was all my fault, and if I just did it better I wouldn't get yelled at so much. All he cared about were school grades. Nothing else mattered. I was discouraged from having any hobbies and basically not being in my room studying. He would coach me on subjects I was weak at, which involved a lot of yelling at me for making mistakes. Despite all that, I managed to do quite well at school until I was about 16. But you can only take so much before it starts to affect you. I started getting anxiety attacks in my level year 17 to 18 doing exam prep, and he would yell at me about it and tell me I was going to fail. No one would want to hire me, and I'd spend the rest of my life in a low-paid menial job being utterly miserable. Which was a very scary thing to hear as a kid, not hating on anyone doing a menial job. Heck, I've ended up doing a few myself, but at the time he made out it was the worst thing that could ever happen to me, and I started to believe it. When I went to university I realized that other people's parents don't treat their kids like that. They actually seemed to enjoy having them around and didn't mind doing things for them. My whole family was just a pretty toxic place to be. Might sound weird, but everyone would just ignore me, be rude to me, and I'd learn not to ask for things because it was such a colossal deal might get taken away last minute. If my parents were feeling vindictive, would get brought up later as proof of how ungrateful I was when I inevitably up. Finally I just snapped. The night before I went back to uni my dad blew up at me over some level of petty. I had permission to use a suitcase from the family stash, but had unwittingly taken the wrong suitcase. A normal person would have just asked me to use another, and I would have without any problems because it's not a problem, but instead he goes and hides the suitcase, forces me to guess the reason he's hidden it, then rants at me for acting like I own his house, not respecting anyone, being selfish, stupid, etc., and finishes it with, "Well, aren't you sorry?" And I just snap and tell him no, it's the first time I've ever stood up to him. He tells me I can't have my stuff back, so I just go back to uni with a few belongings. I literally fell asleep holding my rucksack in case he storms in the middle of the night and tries to punish me further. Didn't speak for 9 months while I went back to university. Got myself to university counseling services and started learning about emotional abuse and healthy relationships. Slowly started to deal with that anger and grief and learn healthier ways of coping. Also started to deal with my underlying depression and anxiety from the constant verbal abuse. After a bit felt better and wrote my dad a letter using my new words and saying, "When you scream at me, grab me and shake me, call me selfish and ungrateful, I feel angry, disrespected, frightened, etc. And it's not okay, and if you do it again I will leave the room, and if you keep doing it I don't want to have a relationship with you." To my astonishment he apologized for the first time in his life. Said he'd screwed up and hadn't been the best of dads. We phoned, there was tears on both sides, and he promised he was going to do better in future. I was so happy and hopeful. We had more contact. Him and my mum came round to visit. They were actually really nice to me. Things went well. By the time I graduated a year later I felt confident enough to move in with them when I couldn't get a job straight away. Wasn't ideal, but the plan was to get a job ASAP and move out. I did manage to get a job within a few weeks, and wanted to finish my trial period before looking for a new place. Parents were surprisingly supportive up until I was a few weeks into my new job. At that point, unfortunately he started screaming and criticizing me again. As I was now standing up for myself, these started escalating into screaming arguments, also demanding that I do a load of cleaning around the house. Pitching in with the chores isn't an unreasonable thing to ask, but he made me clean things that were already clean, just to make a point, and wanted them done right now this second after I came home after a 7-hour shift and a 5-hour commute. Things came to a head when he demanded, not asked, no negotiation. He literally screamed at me until I agreed that I pay rent of 100 PW, because I needed to learn what it was like to live in the real world. I'd been living independently and paying bills, rent and food for 3 years while I was at university. I had actually built up savings by the end of uni by working a part-time job and being sensible with my money. All it was doing was reducing the savings I was building up to be financially independent. Note, my parents are very well off and did not need the money. Would have been a different story otherwise. 2. We had an argument that was getting heated. I walked away. He charged up the stairs after me and grabbed me by the arm, trapping me and screaming in my face. He's a strong guy and I'm a 5 square feet and 8 st female, and I felt real fear. I realized I couldn't stay there anymore. I also realized that it was cheaper to move out and rent a room, and I wouldn't get screamed at into the bargain. I didn't want to go before ID finished my probation, but I felt like staying wasn't much of an option at this point, so I made plans to leave. I was super aware I was still trapped in a house with him and I didn't feel safe around him anymore, especially since he seemed to follow a pattern of escalating the abuse when I was getting more independent, so I just pretended everything was okay until I was moved out and stopped speaking to him. The hour before the moving van arrived, he presented me with a check totaling the rent I'd been giving him. I was extremely angry and told him how inappropriate that was to 1, pressure me into giving him the money in the way he had, 2, treating me like a child who couldn't handle their money, 3, essentially forcing me to leave as it was more financially viable to rent than pay his extortionate rent. He got very angry at me for not being grateful. That was it, I was just done. Haven't spoken to him in 3 years and don't really want to. I have much better relationships with my mom and brothers, who are much more normal people. I see them all separately and out of the toxic family environment, which really helps, but I just feel no desire to see my dad. I really don't want someone in my life who screams and shouts and bullies me physically and financially when they have the option. I also keep thinking of him hurting my little brother and feel physically sick whenever I do. What kind of person can do that to a little kid? Now I'm an adult, you see how small a 3-year-old is, and I never could get angry with one. Side note, yes, my mom should have protected us and as an adult isn't blameless for not stepping in, but my dad is a very controlling person and basically took control of our education and discipline and would tell her not to interfere if she did try and speak up. You could see she wanted to break up the shitty situations at the time, and when he wasn't around things were a lot more relaxed and happier. I guess that's why I still feel able to have a relationship with her, even though she was part of the problem. She still doesn't fully understand why I don't want to see my dad, but I just try to love her and accept the relationship we can have. Edit, I wasn't sure about posting this because it's a big long essay, but I'm really glad I did, as at least a few people saw it and were like me too. It's an isolating and overwhelming situation to be in, and if you're in it, don't give up and keep pushing forward. Life does get better than you ever thought it could. TLDR, cut off my dad because he has anger issues and was emotionally abusive to me and my brothers growing up. He apologized and we tried to fix the relationship, only he slowly went back to being emotionally abusive.